Josh, over to you. Thank you very much.
Great. Mike, thank you so much. And, just because I feel like it's necessary to make you a little more jealous here, I'm hoping that in the next week, I'm going to be driving down with my family to the beach. So not only are we in Chiang Mai, but then in a week from now, I'm hopefully going to be relaxing by a beach and enjoying the weather there.
Oh, sorry, Josh. You need to unmute. I've just unmuted. I've just muted everybody, and it took you as
Okay.
well. Thank you.
You can hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Did you miss what I said?
I heard you were just driving to a beach, and that's probably why I muted you. It was a subconscious thing.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Note to self, don't get Mike mad. He'll mute me. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I'm honored. I really appreciate getting to join you guys. As Mike said, I'm here in Thailand and really just loving being able to connect with these type of groups and just have a fun time really with intimate connection. As he said, if you have questions, I promise you I will stay as long as I need to answer those. But generally what happens is throughout the presentation, sometimes those questions get answered, but you can go ahead and leave them in the comment section. I'll get to as many of them as I can. And if we can't get to them all, I will email and correspond with anybody and answer those questions. So don't worry. I will try to answer those questions, but we're just going to move on here. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about online privacy and security. I don't know if Mike shared with you, but I run a privacy and security brand called All Things Secured. It's a website, allthingssecured.com, and it's a YouTube channel that I'll kind of show you some stuff along the way. But it's been my way of really taking and sharing what I've learned along the way. And all of this started many, many years ago, but it was a really big thing for me back in, let's say 2018, I think. So not too many years ago. But I woke up one morning to an email, this email that if you can read it, it says suspicious activity in your account. And there wasn't just one, there was like 5 of them. And it turns out that I had been hacked. My email address had been hacked. Somehow they had found my password. They had gotten into my email, and it found out later that they were able to go through and find my social security number because I had done some tax related emails with my CPA. They had found all of this stuff, and I had a headache of a time just trying to go through and undo all this mess, trying to regain control of all of my accounts, my bank, and then they also tried to open up a new bank account in my name. So it was just a true headache, and that really spurred me on. I was already pretty passionate about online security and privacy, but that really spurred me on to the next level. I did not want this to happen again, and so I just wanted to make sure that I was as knowledgeable as I could be on the subject, and that's part of what I want to share with you guys. So I'm going to start off by letting you know the good news and the bad news. We'll start with the bad news. The bad news is that if you really want to be secure, if you really want to be private online, then really the truth is you shouldn't be on the internet, period. You shouldn't be doing email. You shouldn't be doing social media. You shouldn't be doing your smartphone or mobile banking, et cetera, et cetera. Really, doing all this stuff exposes you to some level of risk. And so the question isn't, can I be secure online or can I be private online? Because there's always that little bit of risk. It's how can I minimize the risk while I'm online, while I'm using my phone, while I'm doing email, social media, what have you. And so we're going to go through, and I'm going to go ahead and say this up front. I'm going to be racing through a lot of material, not necessarily because we don't have time. We have time for a lot of different stuff. It's just that, online security encompasses a lot of different stuff, and I can't touch on every single one of them. So I'm going to try to just highlight the top things that you can do here. And we're going to start off with social media. So if you look at social media, I'm going to pick on a woman that I found online. I've blanked out her name so that you can't see who she is because that doesn't really matter. Her name is Patty. And I found her. I am connected to her in no way. I am not friends of hers. We have no mutual friends, family members, network, nothing. Okay. And yet, if you were to look at her Facebook profile, I can see where she lives. I can see that she's married, who she's married to. I can see her maiden name. I can see where she works. I can see pictures of her and her kids and then know who her kids' names are. I have all of this information for free. And that's not because Facebook has done anything wrong. That is because Patty has not set up her privacy correctly. Now, if you contrast that with mine, let's say that you were to approach my Facebook account, you were to go find Josh Summers, you'll see my face right here, my happy face with my wife. And if you look closely, you may not be able to see it, but you can go online if you want. And there is no workplace listed. There is no place to show where I live. There is no family connections. There are no friends. I don't even have, you can see here, I've got no photos to show whatsoever, no friends. This is what I mean when I talk about privacy online, because most of the time we don't realize how much information we're giving away. We're doing it freely most of the time because we don't understand how to limit that privacy. So I want to show you just something very quick. Again, I think this is being recorded, so if you need to go back later and watch it, you can do that. Or I also have videos on the YouTube channel that will walk you step by step through this whole process. But if you were to go into your Facebook account and you were to go look at your privacy, so I'm going into settings and then I'm going into privacy. There's one little thing here on the bottom kind of right-hand side that talks about limiting the audience for the posts that you've shared your friends with in the public. So what that's going to do is that's going to take all the posts from the past that you've done and limit that audience to simply your friends, your direct connections. And that one simple thing can take and provide a lot more privacy than you realize. So the takeaway for here, that was just, like I said, one very simple thing that you can do. You can also go through their privacy checkup on Facebook and set who is able to find you via email, what people see in terms of your photos and all that stuff. But that one thing, going through and setting and limiting your past posts, can be huge. So the key takeaway here is, let's say, for your Facebook privacy or for your Facebook settings, set it to friends only. If you have an Instagram account, set it to private, unless you are like a public personality that's trying to gain followers. There's really no reason for you to have a public account. You should be keeping a lot of that stuff private, because you'd be surprised at how many people can use that information. I'll give you one quick example. This actually is from 2 days ago. My mom, who's, believe it or not, here visiting me in Chiang Mai, she approached me and showed me a Facebook conversation she was having with an old friend from years and years ago. And she basically said to me, she's like, this looks weird. Is something wrong here? And that friend had basically had her account hacked. And instead of having anything wrong with that account, what that hacker was doing was reaching out to all of her friends and probably using as much information as they could glean off of Facebook and the public profiles to target those people and tell them, hey, did you know the government was trying to, send out more free money? Did you hear about this? And then they were going to take and then get their information and obviously use that for purposes other than giving out money. But those public pieces of information are what really allow those things to happen easier. But we also need to be careful for that stuff. All right, we're going to transition now over into login security. And I was asked to talk a lot about passwords and password managers, so I'm really going to take my time here as we talk about password security. There was a study that was done a little while ago asking people whether they think it's important to protect their passwords. And 66% of people, respondents, said yes, they think it is important to protect your passwords. Now, I will pause the absurdity that there is 34% of people that think that it is not important to protect your passwords. That we're not going to talk about that right now. What I do want to focus on is the disparity between the people think that it's important to protect your passwords and then the people, 51%, that think it's just too difficult. And I get it. Like, sometimes the idea of adding a new piece of software, something that you have to try to learn to set up, it's just too much. And so that's what I'm going to try to talk about here. But before we get into the software side of things, let's just talk about what it would require to do a good password. So a good password, right? One that, there's no such thing as an uncrackable password, but a password that I would be considered a good password is one that has over 12 characters. It's one that has capital, lowercase, numbers, letters, and special characters being things like an ampersand or a question mark or an exclamation point, all of these things. And then this is an important one, and one that most people tend to get wrong, is it needs to be unique. In other words, it's not something that you use over and over and over again. Now, I would admit the fact that there are different tiers of online accounts, right? So your banking account isn't nearly as important, or excuse me, your Pinterest account isn't nearly as important as your banking account, because obviously if somebody hacks into your bank account, there's a lot more risk there as opposed to your Pinterest account. So there are a lot of passwords that or online accounts that have reused passwords of mine. I'm not saying that that's a totally bad thing. But the most important accounts that I have, my banking, my email, my investment accounts, all of these things, each of those accounts has a very strong password, and each of those accounts has a completely unique password. All right. And at the end of this, I'll explain the thing that I'd like for you to do in terms of your password. But let's look here at our passwords. So this would be an example of one of the passwords that I would have. Okay, it's got capital letters, it's got lowercase, it's got a $, it's got numbers, all of that stuff, and it looks like a almost impossible password to remember, but it's actually quite easy for me. This is, believe it or not, Mary had a little lamb. So I just think to myself, it becomes just second nature as I type it, but I just think Mary had a little lamb, and I have the @ for the A, whose fleece was white as snow, and then using the $ for the S. And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go, with the number 2 being 2. Now that is a very long password. It's memorable to me. Passwords, it's memorable. Being memorable isn't a bad thing, but as long as it is also unique. So how would I make something like this unique? Well, for me, I could take, and if I wanted this to be Facebook, I would actually put an F, a capital F at the beginning with a K at the end. Now, this is not exactly how I do it, because I don't want to give away my, the way that I do it, but this is one way that it could be done. And then if it was Pinterest, it would be a capital P at the beginning and an S at the end, because Pinterest, those 2 letters being the front and back. That's one way that you could do it, to create a unique password that's also a memorable password, and that's also a strong password. All 3 of those things being very important. So that's a manual way you can do it. I want to say that right now, because you do not have to have software in order to have strong passwords. It's not required. You can use paper and pen if you like, although I would argue that that's not nearly as secure as you think it is. But having strong passwords is what's important, and it can be done with or without a password manager software application on your computer and your device. But let's look at what that would mean if we were to use a password manager and how that would look. Okay, now a password manager is essentially a piece of software that we would consider it almost like a vault, where you are keeping and storing all of your passwords behind a single master password. So when I log in, and I'm going to actually show you on my computer in just a moment, I'm going to actually do a live demonstration, but I have to put in my master password. And that master password allows me access to this vault where I can get all of my passwords. I can store my passwords. It makes it easy to retrieve those passwords. And if you look inside, I've blurred out obviously everything here, but it's got, my login for American Airlines, for Airbnb, for all of these different logins that I have. And every time I create a new one, it asks me to say if I want to save the password, and I do. So the funny thing about all this is that I only have to remember that one single master password instead of having to remember all of these other passwords. And I can carry it around on my phone. I can carry it around on my iPad, on my MacBook Pro. I can have the software, and it syncs between all of them. Now, Obviously, there are security concerns, and if somebody wants to ask a question about that, I'll be happy to talk a little bit more about that. But it is a zero knowledge software, which means that even if somebody were to go to, I use 1Password, so I'm going to use them as an example, but even if someone were to go to 1Password and hack and steal your vault, they can't get into that without your master password. So that master password obviously is very important, but it's not like 1Password has access to your vault. Nobody else has access to your vault except for you. And so that's the way that you can use this password. So when I go online, let's say I'm creating a new account for Pinterest. One of the great things about using a password manager is it will suggest strong passwords. And in the settings, I can tell it how long I want that suggested password to be and what kind of characters I want it to have. And then it will save that password. So you don't have to write it down. You don't have to remember it. It will input it in as a new password, and then it will save that. Likewise, if I already have an existing password, then when I go in and log in, it will ask me, hey, do you want to save that new login? And I say, of course, yes, I would like to save that. So now, and here's the key part, when I log into Facebook, you're going to see this little drop down here that I've circled where 1Password is going to say, hey, we have a saved login for you for Facebook. Do you want us to input it? And I say yes. And so when I click on that, it automatically puts in my email and my password. And then all I have to do is log in. Now, there are some advanced security features that I could go into for those that are a little more interested in how I could do it more securely. But let me see if I can quickly log into my account and show you. Well, if my computer can do this, hold on. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to show you right here as I log into my password. I'm going to put in my master password, and it's going to give me access. Well, if I can type it in right. All right. Now I've got multiple vaults. I'm just going to be looking at my test vault here. Within this, okay, hopefully you can see this, but within this, I can put in my logins. Let's say I've got a Facebook login, my bank, or even Netflix, right? I can put in secure notes. So I keep an address for my business and my EIN number in the secure notes because I tend to forget that a lot. I could have it automatically input credit cards if I wanted to, or I can keep my passport or wireless router, all of these things that we tend to forget, our password to our Wi-Fi, our password to, anything. These are the things that a password manager can keep for you. So that if I were to go in, let's say, like I said, let's say I was going into Facebook and I put in here. Now I'm going to have to log in again to my password manager in my browser. But once I do that, when I log in, it comes up and it says, hey, do you want to fill in your password here? And I say, yes, I do. And it will automatically fill it all in. Likewise, if I were to go into Pinterest, like I said, I can put in my email and it can suggest a password for me. And when it does, it's going to ask me, do you want to save this in Pinterest? And I can say yes. And I can say, oh, I want to do it under my test email, right? And save that item. So it makes it super easy, or at least in theory, it makes it super easy. Obviously, there are plenty of things that can go wrong. I've got a whole setup video on my YouTube channel where I walk through how to download, how to set up, and how to start using something like 1Password. So if you have questions about using a piece of software like this, I highly recommend you go and check that out. So again, we want to really lock down our password managers or our passwords to make sure that they are super strong. And the key takeaway here is that you want to make sure that your email and banking passwords are strong and unique. So I think the average, goodness, I'm trying to remember. I think I read somewhere that the average person has nowadays over 250 logins, online logins that they have to keep track of. I have upwards of 350. It is insane to think that I could go through and change all those passwords in a day. It would take me many days probably worth of work to change all those passwords. But if you do just one thing for me today, and you don't think that your passwords for your email or your bank or your investment accounts are as strong as what I've just described, then I would recommend you just take a couple minutes and change those passwords, because those are the ones that, if they get hacked, are the most likely to cause some sort of harm to you. All right. But the second part of this that I really want to hone in on is something called two-factor authentication. If you were to think of passwords as, or let's say your online life is like your house. Passwords are like the lock that, on the front door, the lock on your back door, the lock on your window. Two-factor authentication is like the deadbolt on those doors. So the lock can, maybe sometimes that can be easily picked, but the deadbolt is something that is so much harder to get past. And that is thankfully something that's also free for you to start using. Two-factor authentication. Let me go through exactly what that is. Two-factor authentication is basically, it's kind of like, you've seen it before where they have to text you a code, right? So you log in and they're like, hey, we're going to text you this code to verify that it's really you. Happens for me with Amazon all the time when I use it in the United States. I'm sure there's other places in the UK that ask you for text verification. But there are actually 3 different types of verification. There is the text that I was just sharing with you there. There's also what's called a Google Authenticator or an Authenticator app. There's a lot of them, but the Google one is the most popular one. So if I were to look at my Google Authenticator, I'm going to show it to you right now, see if I can show it to you. It's probably not going to, it's not going to do it. So it's got numbers, right? And I get my let's say my email address would get, when I log in with my email address, I put in my password, and then if it doesn't recognize my computer, it's going to ask me for a code from my Google Authenticator. Now, the only reason it's going to ask for that is because I've set it up, right? I've gone into my security settings in my email and I've set that up. So that's the second way. So you can either have a text SMS message. You can have your Authenticator app, which I've set up with that. Or, and this is the one that I really like, although this one isn't free, you can use a 2FA key. So if you can see here, I've got this, it's really small. This is a USB key. It's also an NFC. So what that means is, just dropped it. I could take and tap this on the back of my phone and the phone would recognize it, right? That's what an NFC is, near field communication. So I can use this USB key, or I've got one on my keychain. Again, hard to see, but it looks like this, where it's got a USB-C, and then because I am a Mac user, it's got the Apple input so that I can use this two-factor authentication on my phone. Now, I don't think I've done a good job of explaining what 2FA is, because what it does is it's a second form of authentication, two-factor authentication, or you may hear it said MFA, multi-factor authentication. And it is like for me, I like having this physical key, because for somebody to hack into my account, not only do they have to have my password, but now they have to have my physical key. So they would literally have to steal my keys off of me and then plug it into the device, because without this, they can't get into my email. They can't get into my investment accounts. They can't get into my Facebook. They can't get into, there's so many different online accounts that offer two-factor authentication. So if at all possible, if you feel like you're ready to jump into something a little bit deeper than just passwords, the next best thing you can do other than stronger passwords is 2FA. It's by far the easiest way to add the maximum amount of security online. I think if there's one thing you take away from this, I would even say this would be more important than getting a password manager, in my opinion. Now, everybody has their own opinions on that, but I really think that having that key or having that Google Authenticator app, that way of having that second layer of authentication, where it's not just your password. Someone can steal your password. They can hack into Target, which has been done before, or one of these other, that's a US brand, obviously, but let's say anything that's a global brand, they can hack into that, get your password, but they cannot steal my 2FA key, and they would have to get access to my phone in order to get my Google Authenticator app. All right, let's go ahead and transition for a moment to VPNs. This is the next kind of how we secure ourselves a little bit. Now, there's a lot of misinformation about VPNs. And so I'm going to explain a little bit about what I think about VPNs, where they're useful and where they may not be. But the important thing that you need to understand, and let me put this somewhere else, here we go, is what do we know about our data, the truth about encryption. And the truth is that these methods of encryption, these methods that, if you know Edward Snowden and all the things that he did in the United States, these methods of the NSA trying to break encryption don't involve actually cracking the algorithms and the math underlying the encryption, but rather they rely on circumventing and otherwise undermining the encryption. So what does that mean? That means that whenever you see that padlock on your bank, when you're accessing your bank information online, or whenever you're accessing any website for that matter, the encryption between your computer and that server that gives you the bank or gives you, it is extremely, I'm not very going to say impossible. It is extremely hard to crack that kind of math. So when it comes to encryption, it is very good. We've got excellent encryption. We've got excellent math underlying all of that encryption. However, there are so many different ways that can be circumvented. So my mom and that example of her friend reaching out to her is a great example. The hacker doesn't have to hack your bank account if they can do what's called social engineering and reach out to you through a friend's Facebook account that, just got, they were able to access that account, and then social engineer you to give them that information about your bank account. Well, they've just circumvented all of that encryption between you and your bank because you gave them the information. And that is the most common type of hacking nowadays. It's not somebody breaking the algorithm. It's not somebody brute force getting into all the stored data of a website or of a company. More often than not, it is actually going to the person and somehow convincing that person to give them all of that important information. So back to encryption for a second. When you look at encryption, let's say how you actually access the internet. Let's say that this is your computer, and you're going to go and access any sort of website, any website whatsoever. The first thing that your computer does is you are going to say basically into your web browser, I want to go to Google. And the first thing that browser does is it makes what's known as a DNS query. It's going to go to, let's call it a yellow pages or a directory where these different DNS servers that have a directory of, okay, Google is found at this location. And so it's going to send back and say, this DNS reply says, oh, Google is at, and then it gives a numeric address. Computers obviously are working with numerals, they're working with numbers, whereas it's much easier for us to type in alphanumeric, google.com. So we need that DNS server to translate that into a numeric address. And then our computer is going to go and use that address to go find that web server and say, hey, we want to request the Google website. Well, that is all done in plain text, or at least it used to be done in plain text back in the day. But now that is what we say is HTTPS encrypted. Most websites that you go to now are HTTPS encrypted. You'll see it up there in the search bar or in the address bar. Usually there's that little padlock, and you'll see HTTPS, or sometimes it's just the padlock and no HTTPS. The important thing to understand is when that happens, when you see that, that means that the encryption is happening between your computer and that server, whether that's the bank, whether that's Google, whether that's anything. If you don't see that, oftentimes Chrome or Firefox or Safari or whatever browser you use will give you a very, very blatant warning. This website is not secure. And that's when you need to be extra careful. If you ever see that message saying this website is not secure, you need to be careful. I would never give my credit card information. I wouldn't even give my email address through a website that is not secured. Thankfully, I think I've seen estimates that over 75% of websites are now secured, but that could be out of date by this point. The important thing, though, is just watch in that address bar to see if there's anything that's not secured. So back to our little diagram here. Your computer's accessing Google. It's now HTTPS encrypted, and everything between your computer and that web server is HTTPS encrypted. But the DNS query is not. So what does that mean? In plain words, all that means is if I was to somehow spy on your computer activity, like, right, let's say I had a man in the middle attack, which is basically I got between you and the internet. And so you're sending everything through my computer and I'm able to see everything that you're doing. What would happen is I could see your DNS query. I could know, oh, he's going to Google, or he's going to go access, let's say YouTube would be a great example. I can know that you went to visit Google or YouTube, but once you got onto the YouTube website, it would all be nonsense to me. All the data coming through would be encrypted. It would be, I would be unable to know what videos you watched or anything else. The only thing that I would know because is that DNS query where you went. Okay. So a VPN in essence encrypts all of that. A VPN, which stands for Virtual Private Network, is a way to connect and add an extra layer of protection. It is not necessary for everybody. As a matter of fact, one of the only reasons I use it here in Thailand is because I want to watch, my kids want to watch Disney Plus, and Disney Plus hasn't been launched in Thailand yet. And so in order for me to watch it, I have to fake Disney into thinking that I'm in the United States. So I use a VPN to connect to a server in the United States, and then I can watch it. I mean, I pay for my subscription. It's not like I'm getting it for free, but I'm watching it in a region where it hasn't yet launched, and so they block it. But the main point here is that VPN encryption really is a safety net more than anything else. And it gets sold all the time as like this end all be all security tool that can save you from hacking, from anything. And that's really not the case. So I want you to know, as you're watching YouTube videos, as you're seeing all this stuff, you'll see advertisements for all of these VPNs. And I use a lot of these VPNs, but they are not an end all be all security solution. They add a safety net of encryption, and they encrypt that DNS that I was telling you about just a moment ago, but they do not make you 100% private, 100% secure online. So what are the advantages of using a VPN? Well, like I said, it's that encryption safety net. So I would, use it particularly for sensitive data. It's not often that I would turn it on for something like that. But if I was at an airport or a coffee shop and I was accessing my bank, just like I said, as that safety net, I would use that VPN. It can hide your geographic location. That's exactly what I was talking about, accessing Disney Plus for me. Or let's say you're in the UK and you want to access the US Netflix, well, let's say you're a UK citizen, you travel abroad. If you want to watch BBC iPlayer, you can't do it from abroad unless you use a VPN to connect to a server in the United Kingdom. And then obviously location spoofing, which is kind of what I'm talking about here. Potential problems include that sometimes VPN IP address gets blocked. That I've heard people have just issues accessing, let's say, certain websites. Even my bank sometimes will recognize that it's a VPN, and I'll get a lot of extra CAPTCHA, which are those things where I have to verify that I'm a human and not a robot, because that website knows this is a VPN IP address. This is not a regular computer. It's coming through a VPN server. You might have a slower internet connection because you're adding an extra layer of encryption. The trust factor, and then it's an annual fee. The trust factor being, like I said, whenever I'm on a website and it constantly gives me these CAPTCHAs where I have to prove that I'm a human being. There are so many different VPNs. It's such a lucrative market because there's just a lot of money to be made there. But the one that I would recommend if you wanted to go with one is ExpressVPN. This is an affiliate link, so feel free to use it, not use it. I don't mind, but this is the one that I would use more often than not when I'm accessing the internet. So if you didn't get that, don't worry about it. I'll give you some more. I've got a web page for you to go to at the very end that I'll share. The key takeaway here is that you should never enter your credit card or login information on a website that isn't HTTPS secured. And then if you want to, use a VPN as a safety net if needed. So I kind of just ran through that VPN because quite honestly, like I've explained a little bit here, I don't think that it is an absolute necessity for somebody. I use it a lot as an expatriate living in a different country other than my home country. And then I use it a lot, just as that safety net, like I was saying, but it's not absolutely necessary. As a matter of fact, most of what I'm saying here, like I said, password manager, it's not absolutely necessary. You can create strong passwords on your own. A VPN, not absolutely necessary. Security is not a piece of software. Security is more about how you approach and your mindset and the questions that you ask as you're going into the internet, and your skepticism, really, more than anything else. So I want to finish off here and then obviously take as many questions as I can, talking about some advanced privacy and security tips. First things first, and this is, basically true of, I'm sure you guys know this by now, but this was a long held belief that I can't get a virus. I have a Mac. And that's 100% false, especially now that Macs have become such popular computers to have. Now, it's much harder to get a virus, I believe, on a Mac than it is on a Windows or an Android device, but it's not impossible. Nor is it impossible to get hacked for anything, because more important than anything else, it's not your computer, it's not your OS, it's not your software. If you can guess, like, what is the weakest link in your online security and privacy? The weakest link is you. That's it. And it doesn't matter if you're 15 years or 75 years old, you are always your weakest link. And the problem that I run into more than anything else with people that are my age, right, between, let's say, the ages of 30 and 40 or 20 and 40, is we think that we're too smart, that nobody could, trick us into giving our information away. And I would hope that you guys have lived life long enough to not think that way. And yet we still find ourselves always in this position of trying to, protect ourselves. And I'll give one example here. If anybody knows, this is a lady named Barbara Corcoran, and she is part of a US TV show called Shark Tank. I love that show. It's probably one of my favorite, entrepreneurial investing shows. But I would consider her a very smart woman, a very, very smart woman. And she was built for $400,000 in a simple email scam that was incredibly simple. Someone was able to gain access to her email and sent her sent her accountant an email from an address very similar to Barbara's that said, hey, can you pay this invoice real quick? It needs to be done immediately for a house renovation. And the accountant was used to those kind of emails. And instead, but she said, it was a little bit out of place, but she didn't, later in interviews, she said, it seemed a little odd to me, but I just ended up, paying it because it was Barbara. I thought it was Barbara's email. Now, the thing she could have done, all she could have done was just walked around the corner and asked Barbara or Barbara's assistant, hey, did you just send me this email? It looks a little weird. But instead of doing that, she just paid it, and Barbara lost $400,000 in that one email scam. And nothing was truly hacked. It was just social engineering. We have it's a Trojan horse. It's the proverbial Trojan horse where we get these emails all the time. As a US citizen, I don't know if this happens in the UK as much, but we get these spam calls and these spam texts all the time. And the way that we guard against those most common attacks is a number of different things. And so I want to walk through just a few of these techniques. One, I never click a link in an email unless I'm absolutely sure that I trust the sender. This includes, that it puts a limit, obviously, but I don't want to go through, and it's especially for those emails where the link is hidden. You don't see the link. Those are especially dangerous. One of the most common scams I've seen for Netflix users is you'll get an email from an email address that looks like it's netflix.com. It's actually like Netflix with an S at the end.com or something like that, but we don't see that. We didn't see the sender. We didn't look at it very closely. And in the email, it says, hey, your billing information, something happened with the billing information. We need you to update your billing. And so you click on the link in the email and it brings you to a website that looks very, very much like the Netflix website. And you put in your Netflix information to log in and it lets you in, and then it lets you go in and update your billing address. But what you didn't realize was the link in that email actually sent you to a fake Netflix page. And you just put in your Netflix information, but more importantly, you just put in your credit card information. So if I were to do something with that, if I got an email from my bank or from Netflix saying, hey, something isn't right in your account, I would not click that link. I would open a new page in my web browser, and then I would go into my bank's website directly, or I would go to Netflix directly and see if they're still asking me for that same information. Because if it's fake, obviously they won't be asking me to update my billing information. But if it's real, well, then I can update it like they've requested, but I don't have to click that link. Another thing you can do is always verify using an alternate method. I had a good friend whose daughter, it was her daughter's in college, and her grandmother is in the United States as well. And the grandmother got a call saying, hey, I'm stuck. I really need you to get me some money immediately. Can you go buy some some gift cards and send them over because I need this money immediately. And it was the daughter that was in college, and so she was just really worried. Now, all she could have done is gone and called her back on the phone number. It was actually a text, It was a text that had gone through, and she could have called her back or called her mom or some other method of verifying that this is actually something that is wrong. Too often than not, if we get something through Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or something like that, we just assume that it's from that person, where we could just easily go hop on another method of communication, whether that's their phone number or whether that's walking to them or emailing them or something, a different method to verify that this is an actual problem. Check the email from address. That's something that is usually a dead giveaway. Amazon is never going to email you from a Gmail account, nor is Netflix, nor is any other. Facebook is never going to email you from a Gmail account or from an account that is where Facebook is spelled wrong. It's so easy to just check that sender from address and make sure that it's correct. And more often than not, you might see that there's problems there. And then never give out your social security number or any sensitive information to somebody who has called you. All right, that's important. And I think that's something worth reiterating again. If you're getting a call inbound, meaning they've called your phone or they've reached out to you, I would never be giving out my information to that person. If they asked for it, I would politely say, hey, thank you very much. I actually need to, I need to go check some things. I'll give you a call right back. And if it's a real legitimate bank or investment firm or whatever it is, they won't care. Heck, they'll go on to the next phone number. If it's a scammer, they'll be very worried and they'll not want you to get off the phone. But if you hang up and then call them back, call the bank, not the number they give you, but the number that's on their website or the number that's on the investment firm's website, you call them and then request to talk to somebody about your account, and then you give them that information. I never give out my social security number or any of those type of things to inbound calls. And the last thing that I want to say is to be skeptical. It seems like such a terrible way to live life. And yet online, it's probably one of the best characteristics that you can take on is just being skeptical. Something doesn't look right. Something doesn't feel right. That person never reaches out to me. Why is that person reaching out to me all of a sudden? Being skeptical. It doesn't mean that you have to, not believe everybody. It just means allow that little red flag in your brain to have some importance so that you'll stop and actually talk about or think through what might be happening here. Because probably one of the most common ways that a scammer uses to influence us is speed, right? Urgency. Hey, you got to do this right now. Right now, we got to get this done because something's wrong. That urgency causes us to lose the ability to think critically and be skeptical. So if you can be skeptical, slow yourself down and think, hey, something doesn't feel right. I need to maybe call someone about this, or I need to think, do some extra research. That's a good thing. All right. Like I said, I've brought you through a lot of different things here. I've got links to a number of different resources, including, the 1Password, link to 1Password and ExpressVPN and the key, this little 2FA key that I showed you. All those links are on this website, allthingssecure.com/MUG. And at the very bottom of that page, if you wanted to, I have a checklist that you can download that will actually walk you through a lot of what I've just talked to you here about. And we'll have links to different videos on the YouTube channel. I also have a link to the YouTube channel on that page. Everything, hopefully, that you might need, that you have questions about, I've put on this page for you guys. And then, hopefully that would answer a lot of the questions you have. But I'm finished here, and I'm really hoping that this has given you just a brief overview, looking at how do we secure our social media? How do we secure our logins? Do we really need a VPN? Where is that very important? And then also looking at the ways that we can remain skeptical and not be scammed through our email, through our messaging apps, and all of that stuff. I hope this has been helpful for you. I really appreciate you guys' time, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Josh. Blimey. 45 minutes of wisdom. There aren't too many questions at the moment in chat, but I will just belt through them if I may. Matt George says, what about thumbprint touch control for access to your password vault?
Yeah, I mean, that can be turned off there's a lot of things that these things like 1Password or other security apps can do. I don't mind using my biometric ID, whether that's on my phone or my computer, but you can turn it off. So I feel like there are different layers of what I would call paranoia, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that if you want to be super paranoid, then maybe don't use your biometric data. But I think it's perfectly safe way to use a password manager if you like.
Matt also says, where do you buy such 2 MFA keys? But Simon's already answered that and suggested Amazon. But I guess, Is that your go-to?
Yeah, and there are a number of different keys. Google has one called the Titan that they sell directly on their website. The one that I use and recommend is called the YubiKey. That's YUBIKEY. You can buy it on their website. I've got a link to the YubiKey on that page that I mentioned. But there are plenty of other 2FA keys or multi-factor authentication keys that you can purchase.
Steve Waldridge also answered, but you may have other suggestions. Any recommendations about a good password manager? My recommendation is don't go for a free one, because sooner or later they'll start charging.
Yeah. So, I mean, Bitwarden would be an example of what you're talking about, where there's a lot of what we would call freemium. So they do allow for free, but eventually, they're creating a product. They can't just do it for free. And so I don't agree. I mean, I agree. I don't think that going for something free is the best idea. But 1Password's good. Dashlane, LastPass. There are so many of them, and really they're all pretty much the same. I like and use 1Password for a number of different additional features, but it's really up to what you like best.
Thank you. So big discussion about HTTPS, but that's been actually very thoroughly answered by Paul Skiro. Thanks very much, Paul. So if you're interested to know about HTTPS and whether it could be faked, read the chat. I think is probably a really quick and easy solution. Owen Saville, do things like 1Password work with devices like Apple TV and Roku?
That is a great question. I don't know about Roku. Apple TV, it does not. So, but thankfully there are workarounds to a lot of that. So for example, I just bought the new Apple TV, and my parents brought it from the States, brought it here to Thailand. In order for me to log into, let's see, which one was it? Well, even to log into just my Apple account, I did not have to type in my password. They've used a lot of different ways. So I think I just logged into the website and put in a code, and it automatically connected the two. So a lot of times you don't have to have your password for Netflix, for Amazon Prime, for a lot of these things. They'll find other ways that you can connect your account without typing that password. But I don't think there are apps specifically for the Apple TV. So in that case, if you had to, and this would be mind numbing, but if you had to, you could pull up that, I could pull up my 1Password on my phone, copy the password, and then on the new Apple TV, at least, I can use my phone as a keyboard, and I can paste it in and use that as a way to put in the password.
So Paul, call me neurotic Skiro, says, how do we know that 1Password and other password managers are truly secure and that they don't have some way to access the passwords? As far as I can see, we just have to trust them when they claim they don't have access to the master key, but there's no way we can actually know that.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim to be super knowledgeable about the backend stuff. I do know that there have been audits of a lot of this code, and then some of them, I don't think 1Password's one of them, but I think Bitwarden is one, where their code is open source, which means that if you know what if you know what you're doing, you can look in there and check to see if what they say is what they're actually doing. And I think even some of 1Password code, now that I think about it, is open source as well. So people smarter than myself have gone in and agreed, or they have verified that this using this master password, they don't have access to your vault. So let me see. I'll answer this real quick, and hopefully this doesn't confuse you, because I've had this same question, right? What if even someone were to hack into my 1Password account with my just master password? Doesn't that mean they've got access to everything, right? The thing that I do, I actually don't keep, for my most important accounts, banking, email, investment accounts, I do not keep my actual password in 1Password. 1Password has a portion of it, and I have them input that, and then I actually have to type in the last 4 to 10 digits myself that I know, only I know. So I call it a double blind password, because my password manager doesn't know my full password, and I don't know my full password. I have to combine the two, so that if someone were to hack in to 1Password somehow, this hasn't happened to my knowledge yet, and using a password manager has been a very secure way of holding your passwords. But if you're wanting to be super paranoid about stuff, I don't even keep my banking password in 1Password, the full password, if that makes sense. So hopefully I didn't confuse you.
What do we think about passwords remembered by Safari or Firefox?
Yes, I generally tend to recommend away from internet browsers. And the primary reason is because internet browsers are meant to browse the internet. They are not password managers. So they're not as good at it as, that's not what they're meant to do. They're meant to access the internet. I personally don't like using, let's say, Chrome's password managers, because I just don't like keeping all my eggs in the Google basket. Apple's making some pretty interesting advancements in security in Safari with the new iOS 15 and everything that's coming up that I'm still exploring and trying to understand. So I can't speak with authority on what's coming in the next weeks or months in regards to how Safari is going to handle that. I don't think it's terrible. It's better than nothing, but I'm still sticking with separating my passwords from my internet browser, which is separate from my OS, just trying to keep that separation so not one company or one piece of software has too much information.
So how about PayPal? Billy McKee says payments. I use PayPal as a layer to protect my cards. Is this okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think PayPal's done a great job of offering a service that can protect you from having to give out your credit cards. There's also other ways. There's a thing called privacy.com. If you go there, you can create, and I don't know if this is only US based, so apologize if it is, but I'm sure there's a company that's going to migrate this over to the UK and the US, but where you can create virtual credit cards that you use. But anything like that, PayPal is a great example where you're not actually giving out, Apple Pay, another great example, where when you pay with Apple Pay, you are not giving out your credit card information. They're just getting a token that allows them to get paid. So I think those are great ways to do it.
It's 12 hours.
Is Firefox a more, I have no idea who that was. Is Firefox a more secure browser than Safari?
Ooh. Is Firefox more secure than Safari? I don't think so. I'm not. They each have their strengths. So the strength of Firefox is the ability to block a lot of the third-party cookies and a lot of the tracking that happens and having a lot of control over that. Safari is also slowly really being able to do that well. So I think in my mind, it would be a toss-up. I'm glad that you said Safari though, and Firefox, because I would generally advise against Chrome, because that's the one that's going to track you no matter what. Safari and Firefox, Brave, all these other browsers are going to do a much better job of at least respecting more of your privacy.
So Eleanor says, I've problems having to often change my passwords because I can't get into various places with my existing passwords, which is, yeah, we've all been there, which is really annoying, and I don't know why. I mean, I suspect that's simply because we're not remembering our passwords correctly, but do you have any other advice?
Yeah, that's where a password manager really shines, because we've all been in that situation where we have to click that forgot password and go reset it because I just don't remember what this one was. And especially for these, even if you use, a password manager only for your, less important online accounts. Maybe let's say you don't even use it for your banking and your email and all that stuff. Let's just say you use it for your shopping and for your, social media and stuff like that. It's just such a great way, fast and simple, to keep those passwords and allow you to retrieve them simply.
Paul Skiro appears to be able to type faster than I can speak. Well done, Paul. And he's put a link in the chat about password managers being hacked and best reviews. So that's worth making a note of. I'll save the chat. So if anybody would like a copy of the chat after the meeting, it'll be here and ready to go. I use Keychain. Nigel says, I use Keychain. Is that a poor relation? Also, if I go over to 1Password, how would I transfer all of my Keychain passwords to 1Password?
Any of these, whether you keep it in Keychain or Chrome or any of these, the export feature is very easy. So you can export it as an unsecured CSV file and then import, which is like an Excel. It's a table with all the information, and then you can upload that into Password and then obviously delete that file because it's unsecured. And I did notice that Paul mentioned that, yeah, the code for some of these are extremely vast and it's hard to go through them all. And I would agree with him. It is a fine line that we all have to make a decision on for ourselves, which is, who am I going to trust and how much am I going to trust them? Because you have to put your trust somewhere. And so that's where it makes a difference who you trust, which companies you trust. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then don't. There are ways to do passwords on your own without a password manager. So I know the number of people that just think password managers, it just seems too risky to me. Fine, I get that. And so don't use them. But I think that they've proven themselves over the years. And I'm like I said, because I use the double-blind password for my most secure passwords, I'm not that worried if somebody were to somehow hack into my password manager, because they're just getting access to, some shopping accounts or something.
On that very subject, Martin says, would it be possible for you to show us how to set up this double layer security in 1Password?
Sure. Let me see. I mean, I've got a whole video that walks through the double blind password. If you wanted to, I can try to show you at the end. Let me see if I can put this over here. So let's say that I am adding a password. Let's say, let's do it with Facebook. Well, I'll show you as I started off. Okay. So I have asked, I've asked 1Password to create a new password for me, if it will. Let's see here. Oh, it's locked. That's why. So if I go in here and it asks me to save, oh, for heaven's sake. Oh, I didn't do it. Okay. That's why. Sorry. Okay. So here I am. If it asks me to use a suggested password, okay, I use that suggested password and I save it. Let's say I save it as Pinterest and I put my email in here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that. Okay. I've saved it in 1Password. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in and I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of extra, you guys, sorry. There we go. I'm going to add I just added a few different digits to the end, and then I'll continue and save that. So the one that was saved in 1Password is what it has. And then I know I always add the same digits and alphanumeric code to the end of all these, but it's still a unique password. So that when I log in, let's say I did this with Facebook. Okay. So let's say I go in here. So if I'm logging in, I actually click on 1Password to say, okay, it puts in the password, and then I'm going to type in my extra digits. And now I can log in because I typed in those extra digits. So I saved it in 1Password. And then before I clicked further into, telling it to set up this account or telling it to save the new password, I added those digits separate from 1Password. So that now when I log in, I just add those extra digits. And that means that what is saved in 1Password isn't the actual password. It's just a portion of it.
Most of it. Brilliant. Jan wants to speak to you. And of course, you're very welcome, Jan, if you'd like to unmute yourself far away.
Thank you. I actually wanted to just add on to the comments that you made about not being seduced by making phone calls as far as security is concerned. A couple of years ago, I had a phone call from two men with Scottish accents purporting to be from my bank, and I know the bank has a big office in Edinburgh. They had my name, my address, my passwords, all sorts of details about me. They wanted me to go to my bank, to a branch, and actually transfer money and so forth. And I was getting increasingly concerned about this. And then this sounded like an Eastern European woman's voice came on the phone. And at this stage, my husband realized that there was something, and he dialed 999 for our police. And got on the Martlesham police in Suffolk, which is one of our main HQs for police. The operator heard this woman say, if you transfer this money, we will come to you in your bed. So don't sleep easy tonight, because we know where you live. We've got all these details on you, and we will come and murder you. And the police operator was so shocked by this as well. We actually had a police constable around a couple of hours later. And he would say to everybody, any information that you have about an attempt to hack you or whatever, pass on. I believe there are places you can actually alert to this, because they said the more we get these details that we can build a picture, the more likely to catch these scammers. But it was one of the most frightening experiences of my life. The constable who came around said, look, don't worry, they're not going to come and murder you. You could imagine if it was, say, an elder son, who really was very scared, would either do what they wanted to do or fear. I just wanted to make that comment because I think some people really understand how nasty these can be. The question I wanted to ask was about cookies. Are cookies the way they actually build up information about? And how can you stop? You know, some places I don't know, we use cookies to make your experience better or whatever. I'm not quite sure how they do that, but say it's one university contact, I don't mind that so much. But how do you stop cookies and how dangerous are they in terms of information about you?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not just cookies. Like there's a lot of these, your actual computer can be what's called fingerprinted. So they can use your combination of screen resolution and type of device and all these things to kind of fingerprint you and follow you around as well. The best thing right now is to use something like a different browser, and then go into the settings for that browser, and it's going to allow you to set what you can and can't do, or what cookies can and can't follow you. So you can have it to where it asks, the browser will actually ask you, do you want to allow this cookie? And you can say yes if it's something that you want that ease of use for that particular login, or no if you don't even know what that's for. So there are a lot of that power comes with the internet browser that you use, whether or not a lot of this gets stored. Likewise, I mean, you can also, a lot of stuff follows you around when you're searching through Google itself. And so there's some people that prefer using something like DuckDuckGo to make searches, because that, I'm sorry?
I use DuckDuckGo.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a very good way to search privately and to make sure that nobody's following you around that way either.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Shan.
Yeah.
Owen, actually, well, let's do some unmuting and asking our own questions. Owen, would you like to just ask that question about 4 or 5 unrelated words?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so a while back, there was this idea that you just string 4 or 5 average length normal English words together, and that is more secure than using cryptic numbers, @ signs, letters strung together. Is that still an idea, or has that been trashed?
Yes. No, it's still an idea. So I think what you're referring to, there was a study that was, math was done to prove the fact that if you did, a total phrase, no numbers, no capitals, just a phrase, I love my mother very much, she's a great woman, and it's, like 24 characters long, that will mathematically be a stronger password than doing a shorter, password with numerals and exclamation points. The problem, and it's an unfortunate problem, but the problem that you run into is that there are many online accounts that won't allow you that many digits. They will cap you and say you can only have 16 digits, or you can only have 18 or 20 digits. And if that's the case, then when we're talking about doing something that's only between 12 and 16 digits long, or 12 and 18 digits, adding in a lot of these special characters does add a bit of complexity and strength to the password. So to answer your question, yes, as long as it's a longer password, then just letters is incredibly strong. But the problem comes when you get limited to shorter passwords.
Brilliant. Eric asks about a browser I've never even heard of. What about Ecosia browser? Is it safe?
I can't even comment because I don't know. I haven't used it before, so I'll have to look into that myself.
Eric, have a look at DuckDuckGo, because the world is using DuckDuckGo, and it doesn't follow you anywhere like Google unpleasantness. So tons. Thank you so much, Paul Skiro, in chat. So as I said, I will save this at the end and pass it to everybody, I think, because there's so much useful information here. Ferroz has added a link for a Pam Ayres video. Well, I'm not familiar with it. So the address is in the chat if you want to have a look. Joss, you familiar? Probably not.
I haven't looked at it.
She's a English poet who writes kind of nonsense, really warm but very funny, very sarky poetry. So I suspect there's probably a nice little video to be watched there. Very famous in this country. Have we got any more? Nope. Well, looks like we're there. Would anybody else like to ask any questions? If so, please feel free to unmute and fire away.
Mike, may I add something to the lady who had the scary calls?
Yes, of course.
That there is in this country a national cyber security centre who encourage people to email them with details of these nasty calls. And the email address is, I quote, report@phishing, phishing.gov.uk. And also they say, if you're going to report to us, please send us screenshots of the scam text.
Thanks very much, Peter. I think John Cook has already put that email address in the chat, but I'm just adding, please add screenshot. There we go. Does anybody else have any questions?
Mike, John Sharman.
John Sharman, hello.
What about, I've got a LibreOffice spreadsheet where I keep a few passwords and then the spreadsheet is secured in Apple's iCloud. Is that very secure?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's again, like I said, it's levels of paranoia. I mean, is iCloud secured? Yes, it is encrypted. And so you can use it in that way. But there are better options. So like I said, it's just incremental steps better, I would say. So yes, it's not a bad way to do it. And if you're comfortable with that, I don't think it's terrible, but there are other ways.
Eleanor wrote again saying she's got a little book that she keeps passwords in, which she doesn't take out of the house. I hope you keep it well hidden because it's a bit dangerous. If somebody breaks in and happens to stumble on it, you're basically giving away your world. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that, Josh, but
yeah, I would just say if you can add two-factor authentication to those, then that makes it that makes up for some of that risk of having them all written down in a book.
Yeah.
The way I do this is Paul here. I write things down. I store them in a secure notes file or something like that, but I never write down the full password. It's just got clues in there. So I might use, if I say P dot, I know that's my special P password. And if I say 7 dot, that's my special 7 pin. And by combining these, that means I just need to remember maybe 20 secure passwords and 20 pins, which are numbers I'm familiar with. It might be phone numbers, it might be book titles or whatever, with some extra things added in to make it a bit more secure. And then you can just combine those. So, my Facebook password might be FB, followed by P dot, which means my P password, followed by 3 dot, which means my 3 password. And that is secure. So that gives me, I can write it down. It's all online. But if anyone saw that file, it's useless to them because they won't know my secret passwords are only in my head. And that seems a good approach to me. But you'd have to remember things that way, of course.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So these days, after I heard you talking at Naples some months ago, I adopted first letters of words of favourite songs. So So somebody would have to come and torture me to get a playlist out of me.
Yeah.
In order to get
Yes, I was going to say I do things similarly to Simon. I think it was Simon, and have my own code words and so forth, write them down. Nobody else would have a clue what they meant. And I find that quite a good way of doing things. I did wonder, this might be completely relevant, but what about Zoom and Microsoft Teams? Somebody told me the other day that Zoom's not encrypted and Microsoft Teams is. And so if we're involved in debates or discussions or whatever, then that can be a problem with Zoom. It's not encrypted.
I thought Zoom was encrypted these days.
I don't know. That's just what I was told, really.
I believe it is, because I believe that there were issues where a year and a half ago, when we first joined, when we first started our online meetings, Zoom were going through a really bad period because there were all sorts of security issues. And one of those was, I believe, that they were claiming that everything was encrypted when it actually wasn't, but they fixed that very swiftly. And that's why they're as popular today, I think, as they are, because, they took all of the complaints on board and acted really swiftly. So I think you're safe now. Yeah, Ferris has just said this meeting is encrypted. Click on that little green shield. Oh yeah, I've never done that. So there's a little green shield in the top left corner. Encryption enabled, it says. There you go. Thanks, Ferris. I didn't know that. Fantastic. Well, we're speeding towards 12:30. So do we have any more questions before we let Josh enjoy his evening?
I'd like to say a really huge thank you for inviting us down in Devon, the Eczema group. That's been invaluable.
You are very, very welcome. And it's lovely to see you. And thank you very much indeed for coming along. I hope we'll do it again. Josh, that was extraordinary. Thank you so much. I said when you finished speaking, that was like nearly an hour of just kind of constant wisdom being thrown at us, and incredibly useful. And we can't thank you enough.
Great way to spend a Saturday morning.
So, I'm sorry, Peter, I missed that.
I said it was a great way to spend a Saturday morning.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the gin and tonic.
Definitely.
And I hope we'll see you again sometime.
Absolutely.
I will pass. Obviously, I'm gonna save the. Well, the chat gets saved here anyway, I think. But I'm going to save the chat. If you want to save the chat yourself, if you open up the if you open up the chat box by clicking on the chat button, at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little box with 3 black dots in it in a horizontal line, and if you click on that, you can see Save Chat, and if you click on Save Chat, that'll save it to your Mac. But I'll save it anyway. So if it's available, if anybody needs it from me, just ask. Josh, thank you so much. Absolutely fantastic morning. Really, really helpful. And have a great day and evening, I should say. And I hope we shall see you again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure. I hope. And
thank you very much.
I'll
Josh.
just add this, Mike.
Really interesting.
If anybody wants to ask any further questions, I mean, it sounds like Paul's very knowledgeable. So he sounds like he could answer any of these, but if he's unavailable, you can reach out to me. It's just josh@allthingssecured.com, and I'll try to my best to get back to you.